just realized that all 3 of those books did have lesbians in them. That wasn't actually the premise of this video. However, it was what happened. Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about some of my favorite books that I've read in lockdown so far. So I used to make book videos on this channel and it was something I really enjoyed, but it was always a problem for me, usually due to various camera issues and also due to the fact that it was just hard to get started. But now that I have an extended period of time with which to get started where I basically don't have to worry about time, maybe I should worry about time, but I'm not going to, it really feels like the right time to do it. So when I used to do book recommendation videos on this channel, I usually did this thing that I called 3 recs, in which I recommended 3 books. I liked doing this because it meant I could not lose attention with either myself or with the audience, but also I could go in depth into each of the books. I actually have several favorite books that I've read in lockdown so far, and I'm kind of going to give them all a mention, but I'm going to focus on my 3 favorites. So if you want to hear all of them, you might want to stick around till the end. The first book that I have to recommend today is Criers War by Nina Varela. I've been excited to read this book for so long. I had a really good friend who kept telling me to read it. Bob, if you're watching this. There are a few things that I really love about this book. First of all, I have always really loved premises in which there are 2 enemies sort of on diametric opposite sides, but they have to learn to care about each other due to some kind of circumstance, and then they fall in love. It's one of my favorite tropes, like I always love this shit. This book follows a world in which a race called Automai, which are essentially, I mean, you know what an Automai is. It's sort of a mechanical human. They rule the world, and in this specific novel, it's about 80 years after this war between humans and Automai happened, and we follow the sovereign's daughter, Crier, and a human girl, Ayla, who is attempting to take her down. And they were both girls. In this world, we're about 80 years after a war between the humans and the Automai, and we're following Crier, a young sovereign's daughter who's attempting to learn her place in the world, and Ayla, a human who maybe has some plans of her own for what she wants to do with Crier. I feel like this book just plays with all of the tropes I love, but in such an interesting way, and there are just so many plot points that really got me. There were some plot twists I didn't expect, and I was so invested in these characters. I've always really loved the trope of a character who is unhuman in some way, falling in love with a character who's more human. It's so interesting all the time. I also really love the trope in which one character is like a villain or a creation in some way, and they think they're flawed because they have feelings. Not necessarily romantic feelings, just feelings in general. In this case, Crier has a flaw, which is passion. I don't know why. I love it so much. I don't know. I just loved how that all unwound. I thought it was so sexy. I think the way this novel handles power dynamics between Crier and Ayla is really good and really interesting. Obviously, Ayla is in a lower position of power than Crier, and there are a lot of moments in this book in which Ayla is disturbed by that or feels bad about it when Crier attempts to help her or help other humans in the palace in some way. It's just interesting seeing Crier really discover that and discover why that is. Also, the romance between them is just, it's so good. It's about the repression, it's about the tenderness, it's about the romance, it's about the angst, it's about they're both lying to each other. It's so good. It's so good. So yes, this is the first book in a duology, I think, and the second book's coming out pretty soon, and I don't know how I'm gonna wait. This was so good. It was so engrossing. I'm so glad that I finally actually picked it up. The second book I'm gonna talk about today is Come Tumbling Down by Shannon McGuire, the 5th book in the Every Heart a Doorway series. So these books, as you can see, they're very skinny. I own all of them, and they're about the length of 2 novels total. This is a novella series about portal worlds and a home for children who have gone into a portal and then come back, but they never come back the same. The first book focused on Nancy, who had gone to an underground basically hell. In that book, we met several other characters, including sisters Jack and Jill, who came from this really creepy vampires, monsters world, and we didn't really know a ton about them, but it was really interesting seeing those glimpses. Now, the second book is then a prequel about their backstory before that novel. I feel like when I first started this novella series, I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't that invested in it. But as I've read through more of these books, I find that I keep getting more invested in the arc of this home and the arc of these characters. There are so many side characters in this novella series now that we've either gotten points of view from or haven't gotten points of view from but have been in several of the novels. And it's just fun seeing how their arcs all evolve, how they all grow, how they all change. And I'm rooting for all of them in different ways because they're all so distinct. And I've really gotten invested in this storyline and these relationships. This book, Come Tumbling Down, is the second of the sequels. The third and fifth one are sequels, and then the second and fourth are prequels. And this one again follows Jack and Jill when Jack mysteriously appears back at the home and asks for the help of the home to help her take back her land. I think Jack has been my favorite character of this series basically since the beginning, and I'm so invested in her storyline, and I really loved seeing where she went in this book. I feel like the development she got here was so wonderful. We'd seen all of her backstory, so it was nice to see where she progresses from the point she was at the end of the first book, because I feel like that's when I first got invested in her. Then I learned more about her, I was more invested in her, and then I got the continuation. There's a lot of moral ambiguity going in here. There's a lot of struggle between siblings and just a lot of interesting world building. I feel like this world is so eerie. I don't want to live there, but I'm also kind of enticed by it at the same time. I think this actually might be my favorite of this novella series so far. I've rated the last 4 5 stars, but this was really good. Also, if you've read the first book of this and thought it was good but not great, I highly recommend that you continue on because that's how I felt about the first book, and I was never expecting to get this invested in the series, and it's worked for me so much, and I'm so excited to continue. Book number 3 is one I actually finished last night, and yes, I'm filming this the same day as I'm posting. It is The Grief Keeper by Alexandra Villasante. I got this book from my local independent bookseller, Kepler's, over my spring break, so right before all the lockdown craziness started, and I honestly just picked it up at first because the spine was so pretty, and then when I read through the premise, I was like, oh, lesbians? Immigration law? So yes, it started out kind of random, but this has turned out to be one of my favorite books of the year. Pulling up the notes on it that I wrote last night at 2 a.m. So in this book, we follow Marisol, an immigrant from El Salvador, applying for asylum in the United States with her sister, Gabby, who she's attempting to protect. When her asylum request gets turned down, she's given an opportunity to stay in the U.S. that is not what she expected, that requires her to literally take on the grief of another girl about her age. The girl isn't aware of what's happening and is only aware that they're both going through a treatment together, so it's a really complicated novel about essentially how immigrants are devalued. The only reason Marisol can be offered this job is because no one else would be willing to take it. She's in a desperate position, and because she's in a desperate position, she's essentially preyed upon for this job. I found myself really invested in Marisol as a lead character. She's a character who could so easily be meek or boring because for a lot of the book, she comes across as a lot less willing to speak up. But her strength comes out in other ways, and I really enjoyed that characterization and that nuance to it. She's willing to do anything to protect her sister and her loved ones, even if she's not always willing to do everything to stick up for herself. And I loved her. I really loved her. She also, throughout the book, falls in love with Ray, the girl who she's taking the grief away from. The romance between them is written in such an interesting and respectful way. I ended up really getting invested in this relationship despite when I first was coming across the premise of this relationship, kind of being a little skeeved out by it. But it's just tender and it's just sweet. I really enjoyed seeing Marisol find some kind of family with Olga, for example, who's a really interesting side character. I also really appreciated that there are a couple of characters in here that could very easily be villainized, and they're both treated with a lot of nuance that I think is just so amazing. I really respect how much this author refused to take an easy way out in anything. I really loved the writing of this. It's just really pretty. And I also found myself so invested in this book that I tore through it in one day. I started it yesterday morning and I finished it last night. So yes, this one has been going on under the radar quite a bit, but I highly recommend it. In lockdown, I've actually had some really good reading experiences, so I'm just gonna go through a really quick playthrough of some of my favorite books that I've read so far. First of all is The Likeness by Tana French. This is suspense and one of the most claustrophobic books I've ever read in my lifetime. Next is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wine. This is some of the best plot twists in any book I've ever read. It really messed with my mind, and I also loved the two main characters. It's two lady pilots who are best friends. At the end, one of them marries the other one's brother. That's not a spoiler, I just think it's kind of gay. Like, this is just not Brideshead Revisited. What are we doing? Next up, we have Nothing Left to Burn by Heather Izell. I would love to do a further recommendation on this book, but it is amazing. Contemporary about intense relationships. Let's just go with that. And also, fire in California. Californians literally live in hell. I get to say that because I used to be a Californian. We also have like 8 different Greek tragedies. I'm not gonna go in depth into this. I can't do it. I can't do it. We also have The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as I assume most people know. I was not expecting to like these so much, but they're really interesting, and they're all very short. I read one before bedtime, like a cheesy bitch. And last but not least, we have Prosper's Demon by K.J. Parker. This is a novella. I picked it up for $1 at a San Francisco thrift shop. Also over spring break, what was I doing? If you've read any novellas by K.J. Parker, you know he's really into just sort of messing with your mind, and I just really liked this. This was really interesting. I hope all of you are having good lockdown reading months, and I'm hopefully going to be coming out with more book content pretty soon. I've been really enjoying filming during lockdown. It's honestly the only thing keeping me sane because all of my brain cells have vacated my body. Sending all of you and your families love, and bye!